12,300 years ago, someone crouched at a hearth in what is now the Utah desert and used tobacco, thousands of years before the pyramids, the wheel, or a single planted crop of wheat anywhere on the planet. That is the oldest confirmed evidence of humans using tobacco, and it survived as four tiny charred seeds sitting inside an ancient fire pit next to a pile of roasted duck bones. I'm Otto, and today we're digging into one of the oldest habits our species ever picked up, taking a plant that can kill insects and figuring out how to make it feel good instead. Those seeds turned up at a place called Wishbone, out on the edge of Utah's Great Salt Lake Desert. A team led by archaeologist Darren Duke, publishing in the journal Nature Human Behavior in 2021, identified them as wild desert tobacco, a species called Nicotiana attenuata. Nobody at that hearth was farming yet. Nobody had domesticated a single plant or animal anywhere in the Americas. But someone already understood that this particular weed did something worth chewing, sucking, or twisting into a wad, pushing the known history of human tobacco use back roughly 9,000 years earlier than scientists had assumed. Duke himself put it simply, tobacco is the king of intoxicant plants, and we can now trace its roots straight into the Ice Age. So why tobacco out of every plant on the continent? The genus Nicotiana produces nicotine as a natural pesticide, a chemical the plant evolved to poison insects that try to eat it. It just so happens that in a human brain, nicotine fits almost perfectly into receptors built for a completely different chemical, acetylcholine, the one your nervous system already uses to fire muscles and lay down memories. Nicotine slots into those receptors and drives dopamine into a reward circuit called the nucleus accumbens, the same pathway behind most things humans get hooked on. Alertness sharpens, mood lifts, appetite dips, at least for a while. Researchers studying nicotine addiction today still point to that same circuit, the pathway running between the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens, as the core reason the plant is so hard to put down once your brain gets used to it. Our ancestors had no idea about receptors or dopamine. They just noticed the feeling. And over thousands of years, separate groups across both American continents began cultivating wild tobacco into stronger, more reliable crops, eventually giving us the two species that dominate the plant's history, Nicotiana rustica in the north and Nicotiana tabacum further south. Now, here's where I want to slow down, because for most of that long stretch of history, this was not a habit you picked up at a corner store. It was ceremony. Across North and South America, tobacco carried real weight, a way to send a prayer up on smoke, seal a peace agreement between rival groups, mark a healing ritual, or open a conversation with the spirit world. It moved from hand to hand during councils, offered rather than just consumed, treated less like a snack and more like a sacrament. Many Plains nations built entire diplomatic customs around a shared pipe, what later became known to outsiders as the calumet, passed around a circle as a sign that whatever was said next was spoken honestly. Further south, in parts of the Amazon, healers used concentrated tobacco preparations to reach altered states during healing ceremonies, treating the plant less as a vice and more as a tool for serious spiritual work. That context matters a lot, because what came later, the mass production and the marketing and the addiction built for profit, would have looked completely unrecognizable to the people who first cultivated this plant with genuine reverence. We also have direct chemical proof that people eventually moved from just using tobacco to actually smoking it. In northern Alabama, archaeologists recovered a carved limestone smoking tube from a site called Flint River, sealed away in a museum drawer for about 70 years before anyone tested it. When researchers finally ran it through gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, they found nicotine residue baked right into the stone, dating the tube to somewhere between 1685 and 1530 BCE, roughly 3,600 years ago. That is currently the earliest solid chemical confirmation that people in North America were inhaling tobacco smoke on purpose, not just chewing the leaf. A couple thousand years after that, mound-building cultures in the Ohio Valley, the Adena and Hopewell peoples, were carving elaborate stone pipes shaped like animals, valuable enough that some were buried alongside the dead. And down in Mesoamerica, a painted vessel from Tikal, Guatemala, dating to around the 7th or 8th century, shows a figure smoking tobacco directly, one of the oldest surviving pictures anywhere in the world of a human being doing exactly what we're talking about today. So tobacco stayed a distinctly American practice for thousands of years, right up until 1492 kicked the door open. When Columbus's crew reached the Caribbean, a sailor named Rodrigo de Jerez reportedly watched indigenous Cuban people smoking rolled leaves and decided to try it for himself. As the story goes, and historians will tell you, parts of it have grown in the retelling, he brought the habit home to Spain, where his own neighbors were so unsettled by a man exhaling smoke that the Inquisition locked him up, convinced he had to be possessed. True in every detail or not, within a single century, tobacco had traveled from a handful of American cultures to nearly every port in Europe, Africa, and Asia. A French diplomat named Jean Nicot popularized it in France, which is where we get the word nicotine. And in England, Sir Walter Raleigh made pipe smoking fashionable enough that even Queen Elizabeth reportedly gave it a try. Not everyone was thrilled about it. In 1604, England's own King James I wrote an entire pamphlet called A Counterblast to Tobacco, calling it loathsome to the eye, hateful to the nose, and dangerous to the lungs, then taxed it heavily instead of banning it outright. The Ottoman Empire went much further. Sultan Murad IV outlawed tobacco entirely in 1633, blamed it for a fire that tore through a fifth of Istanbul, and made smoking a capital offense, reportedly disguising himself to catch smokers in the act himself. None of it worked for long. Bans in France, Russia, and the American colonies came and went, and tobacco kept spreading anyway, because by then, it was already wildly profitable. That profitability is really what pushed tobacco from ceremony into full-blown mass addiction. European colonizers turned it into a cash crop, grown at enormous scale by enslaved labor across Virginia and the Caribbean. Then in 1880, an American inventor named James Bonsek patented a machine that could roll 200 cigarettes a minute, compared to about 4 a minute by hand. Tobacco magnate James Buchanan Duke put that machine to work and built an empire on it, and suddenly, cigarettes were cheap, standardized, and everywhere. Companies leaned into it hard, even handing out free cigarettes to soldiers during both World Wars, which hooked millions of young men who came home with a habit for life. It took a surprisingly long time for the science to catch up with what those companies already suspected. Starting in 1950, British researchers Richard Dahl and Austin Bradford Hill tracked tens of thousands of doctors over decades and found an unmistakable statistical link between smoking and lung cancer. By 1964, the United States Surgeon General released a landmark report confirming it publicly, and public health guidance has been playing catch-up with a few thousand years of human habit ever since. I am not here to lecture anyone. Plenty of people across this entire story used tobacco with real intention and respect for what it meant to them. But it is worth knowing that the plant our Ice Age ancestors were already handling by a hearth 12,000 years ago eventually carried consequences nobody back then could have measured. That is the strange arc of it. A wild desert plant, used around a campfire before agriculture even existed, carried as a sacred practice across an entire hemisphere for thousands of years, then industrialized into one of the most widespread habits on the planet within a few centuries. 12,000 years of ceremony, 300 or so of assembly lines. And somehow the second part is the one most people picture first, when they hear the word tobacco. If you like digging into where our stranger habits actually come from, subscribe, because I've got a lot more deep dives into ancient human life headed your way. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm Otto, and I will see you in the next one.